Jobs, power, and the price of just about everything. They're all tied to South Africa's latest climate promise. So today we're unpacking the cost of these ambitious green goals, the recent crash that's put WeBuyCars investors on edge, and the fierce debate over South Africa's new marriage bill. Plus, in the Wildcard, the forgotten train that once made us world leaders in speed. My friends, if you are enjoying the show, be sure to like and subscribe. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. South Africa has just updated its climate pledge to the UN, a move that could shape everything from Eskom's future to how our cities are built. You see, under the Paris Agreement, this global deal where almost every country agreed to cut emissions to slow down climate change, each nation has to file a 5-year plan known as the Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC. So South Africa's new NDC, published this month, sets tougher 2035 goals, cutting emissions to between 320 and 380 million tons, with a long-term target of net zero carbon by 2050. It also adds 8 national adaptation goals, from protecting water systems and farmlands to upgrading infrastructure against floods and heat waves. And look, the plan won't be cheap. Government estimates it will cost 3.7 trillion rand over the next decade. But as we discussed yesterday, Europe's 12 billion euro global gateway pledge could technically help plug part of that gap, funding renewable projects, grid upgrades, and green hydrogen initiatives that could help align with South Africa's just transition goals. Now, supporters say that this marks a genuine shift towards a cleaner, more sustainable economy. Critics, though, argue that with millions still facing poverty, joblessness, and failing services, the country can't afford to prioritize a green future over fixing the basics. As for you, though, what do you think? South Africa's new marriage bill has sparked a national argument where faith, culture, and equality all collide. You see, right now, under the old laws, girls as young as 15 can marry with parental or ministerial consent. Now, the new bill would ban child marriage outright, setting a stricter minimum age of 18 and making it a crime for anyone to arrange underage unions. It also aims to unify the country's patchwork of marriage laws, recognizing civil, customary, and religious marriages, including same-sex unions. But that's where things start to get tense. So religious leaders warn that state rules could override faith traditions, especially a clause saying that a first wife must give written consent before her husband marries again, which is a direct clash with Sharia practices. Others, though, from a different angle, argue that the bill recognizes traditional polygamy but ignores modern partnerships where people live together without marrying. Supporters call it equality under one law. Critics see it as government policing religious beliefs. Either way, it's forcing South Africans to ask, who should decide what counts as marriage? Faith, culture, or the Constitution? If you've ever traded in a car at WeBuyCars, you're not alone. I mean, the company's become a South African fixture. But just this week, its share price dropped nearly 15%, the biggest fall since it listed last year. Now, that's despite WeBuyCars announcing that annual profits are expected to rise by more than 12% to almost R1 billion. Now, the problem here is that when the company launched on the JSE in 2024, it issued millions of new shares to help raise cash for expansion, meaning that each share now represents a slightly smaller piece of the pie. Still, though, the real story sits under the hood, excuse the pun. CEO van der Walt says that business was softer than expected in the second half of the year, with credit approvals falling to around 40%, and many buyers simply couldn't get financing. At the same time, cheaper new Chinese cars have eaten into the used car market, forcing sellers to accept lower offers. So while WeBuyCars continues to open showrooms and mini centers across the country, investors and car owners are both wondering whether South Africa's used car boom is finally starting to slow down. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, tax revenue came in 18 billion rand higher than expected in the first half of the year, boosted by withdrawals from the new two-pot pension system and stricter SARS collections, offering our finance minister a little extra breathing room before November's budget. To the surprise of many, only a fraction of teachers in South Africa have ever been vetted against the National Register for Sex Offenders. But that is starting to change, as nearly 10,000 student teachers were checked this year under a new government-funded initiative. And as we peek over the border, Zimbabwe's president delivered a State of the Nation address in the dark after a full power failure cut electricity to Parliament. Despite backup generators, he finished his speech under torchlight. Sometimes the jokes write themselves. And on to our bagel bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, who was the first female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom? Was it A, Theresa May, B, Margaret Thatcher, or C, Liz Truss? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. And on to our wildcard section. By the late 70s, Japan already had bullet trains, France was testing the TGV, and South Africa, well, it was quietly breaking speed records of its own. In 1978, local railway engineers took a standard electric locomotive and turned it into something extraordinary. They streamlined the nose, re-engineered the wheels, and tested it on a quiet stretch of track near Carletonville. And when it thundered past at 245 kilometers an hour, witnesses said it looked more like a jet than a train. And it even went on to set a record for narrow gauge rail, one that still stands today. So that experiment reportedly inspired the Metro Blitz, a sleek commuter train linking Joburg and Pretoria in under 45 minutes. It was efficient, modern, and decades ahead of its time, until budget cuts and aging infrastructure pulled the brakes. So for a brief moment, South Africa's rail engineers showed what was possible, a glimpse of a country that could have been moving a whole lot faster if, it hadn't been for the decades of mismanagement and corruption that derailed it. Still though, fingers crossed that we haven't seen the last of the great South African trains. You can call me optimistic, but you know what? The talent's still here. We just need the chance to rebuild it again. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is Margaret Thatcher. Yes, the Iron Lady who became Britain's first female Prime Minister in 1979 and served for over a decade. Funnily enough, Liz Truss followed in her footsteps but only made it 49 days before stepping down. Still though, not a lot of people know this, but she qualified for a lifetime allowance of up to £115,000 a year. Hey, not bad for 7 weeks worth of work. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed watching this one as much as we enjoyed putting it together. Hope you guys will have a great day. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.